Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're going to be reviewing issues 51 to 60 of the Warhammer Imperium Hachette series. Now, the first issue in this is issue 51 is just 2 paints. But what it does do is it goes into some of the lore in the previous issue, which was issue 50, which had the Royal Court. A great issue for the Necrons, in which had kind of a lot of HQ aspects. So you have here some details on the Scorpic Lord, you have the Plasmancer, you have the Crypto Thralls, you have also some extra stories on the Raven Guard, which is another Space Marine chapter, a small little story about the world of Armageddon and the Death Corps Krieg, which is a really cool little army actually, and some kind of tips on painting with it. Now you get Dawn Stone and Palette Witch Flesh with this issue, so if you're following the painting guide, it shows you how to use it effectively. And of course, because the previous issue was such a big one, it gives you some of the data sheets for the Scorpic Lord, the Plasmancer, and the Crypto Thralls. The mission as well itself is, of course, the Necrons against the Sisters of Battle. So that was issue 51, which is a paint issue. Issue 52, however, was very interesting because it's a 2-part issue of this thing, which is the Triarch Stalker, a kind of a really cool, horrible-looking battle tank thing. Now, of course, it starts off with some information about that. It goes into the Imperial's kind of much larger version of these things are called Imperial Knights. They're really cool, big, huge monster kind of titans that walk the earth and kill anything and everything that looks at them. Of course, it goes into some more details of the Triarch itself. And there's a fairly large build guide in this now, because it's a 2-part issue. And there's a lot to do in it. There's a lot of fiddly bits. There's also some weapon options, which is pretty cool. It goes into the stratagems of it. And you have, of course, the tutorial of some of the stratagems. Now, unfortunately, the mission in this one doesn't include the Triarch Stalker because you still have to build the other part of it. So it's another mission against Sisters and the Necrons. You have some command points here as well, just some little handy kind of cutout guide for you. And, of course, this is the other part, issue 53, which comes with the other part of the Necron Triarch Stalker. So this one goes into Warzone Vigilus, some of the factions there. It goes into some of the Adeptus Sororitas vehicles because, obviously, if you want to expand a little bit more on your Sisters of Battle, it shows you some really cool things here in terms of the vehicles you get, and especially the Paragon Warsuits, which are, well, they're just beautiful looking models. You have a little story called Slaughter in the Rift. You have the Bloody Rose, which is a specific order of the Sisters, a fairly psychotic looking one, as you can see. You have, of course, a how to paint guide. So the last issue was all about building it. This one is all about painting it. Now, like I said, it's up to yourself if you want to follow the guide or not. I kind of went my own way with it. You have some more Necron rules, and you also have the data sheet for the Triarch Stalker, and kind of finally the battle for this one includes the actual Triarch Stalker. And also, just one other thing is there was a little supplemental sheet with this one called the Gathering Storm, the Fracture of Beal Tan, which is just a little bit of lore on the Eldar. But anyway, let's have a look at the model itself. Now, this thing was great fun to build. It's a really cool looking monster of a thing. It allows you to build it where the front legs are mobile. It actually encourages you to do that. So if you see here, you can see there's a kind of a little line there that allows mobility with it. So there's actually a nice little bit of posing in it. It looked complicated, but wasn't very difficult to build. I would advise you to build it slowly because there are legs down at the bottom and you can get them wrong. Now, they do kind of fit very specifically. You have your weapon here. You have the Necron Lord here. I tried to use the old trick of the glowy green stuff, Tesseract Glow in the grooves, just to kind of give it a kind of a humming machine effect. But it was a very fun model to make. Now we can zoom in just a little bit and you'll see that there's great details on it here as well, that you have, you know, just the Necron symbol. You have kind of other kind of symbology behind it. You have the claws here. You have the big gun here, which is not movable. You have here the actual legs as well. So you have great options, that there's great kind of, you know, opportunities for detail and for people who would be top tier painters to kind of have a go. And even the console here as well is quite interesting, that it just allows you a lot of freedom to work and paint with it. But absolutely, this was, I have to say, a great model to work on, and it looks class on the battlefield, you know. I mean, it stands out. I mean, it's a big, huge walking spider tank thing that is just going to eat you. And if you've suffered from arachnophobia in any way, shape, or form, like, this is going to be even extra intimidating. What I would say, though, is if you're going to be very competitive, maybe make the legs in like that to make it as small a target as possible. But no, otherwise, this was an excellent 2 issues, and I was delighted to add this to my collection. Now, issue 54 comes with what I believe is the final part of the sisters. Now that they've got a big kind of Triarch Stalker to deal with, they obviously need reinforcements. So this issue, because it's the last issue, I think, for the sisters, is obviously dedicated entirely to them. So there's some really interesting stuff here. You have a background which is injuries and grudges. So you can kind of, to just include your narrative play and make it a bit more fun, roll off a kind of basically grudges that they would have against certain Necron warriors, such as a limb severed by, or an eye gouged out by, a squad slain by, defeated in battle by, relic broken by, a humiliated in a duel by, their canoness killed by, jaw shattered by or knocked down by, and the various enemies such as a Scorpic Destroyer, Necron Noble, Canoptic Reanimator, and so on. So it's a fun little thing to kind of add to the sisters. The course, it goes into how to build the sisters. Now, the only real difference between this section of sisters and the previous one is that these all have kind of bare heads, whereas the previous one showed you how to make kind of the helmeted heads. So it's essentially the same sprue, but to be fair, you can kind of shake it up a little bit. You have a proper paint guide, so because it's the last issue for the sisters, it goes into great detail, and it uses the 2 recent paints, which is Pallid Witchflesh and Dawnstone. So you can use Pallid Witchflesh kind of on the face of the sisters there, and you get to use Dawnstone on the base here as you're kind of painting it up. Something that I kind of did myself. I didn't bother with the Dawnstone part, but I did use Null Oil and Astro Granite for their bases. And also, of course, it goes into the stratagems, and of course, this is the final gallery of your sisters, minus the massive kind of destroyer. The tutorial is just basically Defenders of the Faith and kind of different moments of grace, small little bitty pieces. The final mission, of course, is War of Faith, and it is the sisters against the Necrons themselves in a final battle. So this is the last section of sisters. Now, they're still great fun to paint, but because they're bare-headed, it's actually a little bit harder, I find, than the plain old helmet, because they all seem to have very kind of grey hair. Now, there's a paint I use called Grey Seer, which does the job of white for me very well, and if you've listened to me speak before, I hate working with the colour white. But I do find that Grey Seer has done the best job possible for the hair of the sisters. But it's, again, it's kind of the same body molds, but because you swap out the heads for helmeted ones for actual bare heads, it gives great variety to the sisters. Now, again, they're amazing models to paint. I can't do them justice that they deserve, because I'm only an average painter. I can do it up to a tabletop standard, but that's about it. But they are a great fun model, and as you can see here as well, I followed the guide with the Astro Granite and Null Oil. Now, if you wanted to lighten it up a bit, you could use the Dawnstone, but I kind of like the dirty, mucky oil effect under them, because they're kind of fighting against Necrons, and I'm thinking of oil and machinery. So, as you can see, again, beautiful models, very dynamic poses, very lifelike kind of fluid poses. They're not the big stompy guys like the Space Marines, you know, these are kind of agile female warriors. You have, of course, the ones that are in flight, again without the helmets, and it's a similar pose to the last two, but basically you get a section of 5 with these ones. But yeah, just, you know, this is a fun little kit if you wanted to kind of finish off your full section of sisters. So I mean, like even this one now with the 2 bolt pistols, it's just a cool kind of mad kind of sister kind of Opus Dei Catholic nuns that's going to destroy all around you type of thing. Now you also have 2 extra Flagellants. Now I did something different with this one. The last Flagellant I painted, I made a very dark skin in tone, so I made this one kind of a lighter skin just to kind of change it up a little bit. Also just kind of the changes of clothing, because otherwise it's exactly the same model. So it's up to yourself if you want to maybe kind of put forward a set of twins, but just one kind of a skin tone change really is all you need to kind of help change this model. And the Flagellant, I could have changed it, but I decided to kind of keep it for the same thing, because the way I was seeing it, like, this is someone that's been kind of mutilated and kind of completely butchered, so the skin could be pale anyway because of what it's been done to them. It's the same model as the previous Flagellant, so I just opted to kind of keep it together because, you know, maybe these things are done in batches and would all come out the same way. But nevertheless, this is the final issue of the Sisters, and I had given great thought to collecting these, and I'm not 100% sure because I have had difficulty painting with them. They are superb models, but the level of detail and the color scheme they have requires a lot of white, and it's on fine detail. So if you're someone who can work with white, by all means work away with them. Unless, of course, if you want to go for a different order of the Sisters, like the Bloody Rose, which it kind of tends to be a primarily red color. But excellent models, and if you're a top-class painter, they're definitely worth getting. And even if you're an average painter, they're actually worth getting, because, you know, it forces you to improve, to see where the faults in your skill lie, and to kind of develop and work on it a little bit more. So, unfortunately, with issue 54, we say goodbye to the Sisters. Now, issue 55 comes with some more terrain, which is just pipes. Now, to be honest with you, I know I complain a little bit about kind of getting too much terrain because I have some of it already, but I'm always fond of pipes because they're great for kind of bordering, like an out of bounds kind of play area on a board, and they're just very useful, very easy to build, and very quick to kind of put together and paint. Of course, now it goes into the Mechanicus and some of the battle zones, so just kind of some of the kind of the infrastructure of it. There's a bit of information on the Iron Hands, which are a loyalist chapter. You have some more information on the Ecclesiarchy, which are, now if the Sisters of Battle were like the United States Marine Corps, the Ecclesiarchy, I think, would be like the CIA. They'd be kind of the scary lunatics behind the scenes, and the hardcore pro-America kind of stuff. Now it goes into some of them, but yeah, they're very, very scary individuals, so don't annoy them. You of course have the how to build plasma conduits, which is fairly straightforward, and how to paint, again, which is straightforward. You've got some Adeptus Mechanicus stratagems, secondary objectives, and you have a Genitorium, which is the actual place of the battle. So of course it has some Sisters and it has some Necrons. So the terrain itself is, well, it's nothing new, but I decided to kind of dirty it up a bit. The actual paint guide on that one was, well, to be honest with you, had it a lot cleaner. But I tried to kind of put a lot of Mournfang brown under it. I spray painted it black, then I put Mournfang brown in dabs along it, and then I dry brushed it with lead belcher, and then I dry brushed it again with Rise of Rust, which kind of gave me this effect, and of course did the usual kind of touch up and all the other little details. What I like about it is I got all these pieces done in effectively one sitting, because it's terrain. I could still kind of do the effort that I felt the terrain justified. I mean, I made sure that I got little bits of red in on the dials there, and little things like that. Like, but if you look at it, you can see that there is great detail on it, but it's something that benefits from dry brushing, and it's also, because it's terrain, something that you can kind of experiment with. So I wanted to kind of use the rust aspect that I never had before on the terrain and just see what it looks like. So it's, how do I put it? Terrain is kind of like an open canvas that you can just kind of work on and see what you need or want to do. So it comes, of course, with the usual kind of 2 tubes that you pull out here, and you have just basically 4 pieces so that you can kind of set a big, huge, long kind of playing area that is just, you know, it borders a whole kind of table playing area very well. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issue 55, some terrain. Now, issue 56 comes with 2 paints, but it does touch on something called the Assassinorium, which is basically kind of specialized assassins that the Imperium implies for its protection. It goes into the Adeptus Sororitas and Miraculous Acts, so obviously because it's a religious order, there's huge aspects of faith, and Warhammer 40k does have magic and fantasy and demons, so of course it has to have some kind of counterbalance with Miraculous Acts and good guys. You have Damos, which is a kind of a war zone. It goes into kind of some interesting information on that because it's attached to the Ultramarines, which are the fellas you would be collecting in this. This goes into the Officio Assassinorium. So these are the assassins that are here in the front of the book. It just goes into kind of what they do, how they do it. The Blood Ritual is a little story, and it's interesting because it actually reminds me of a board game that came out a fair few years ago called Assassinorium Execution Force, which was basically 4 assassins trying to stop a kind of magic ritual from happening. So it's just a little story about that. It goes into the Wars of Faith, of course, again, which is all about the sisters. And it goes into kind of some of the other kind of factions of the sisters. So you've got the Order of the Glowing Chalice, Order of the Thorn, Order of the Iron Veil, and as you can see, there's kind of different looks here. So if you wanted to not follow the guide or go your own way with it, you can, of course, kind of do different things. So you have the Order of the Ashen Shrine, Order of the Wounded Heart, which has a nice red and white colour, which would be, well, the colour of my home county. And you have the Order of the Golden Light. So the Golden Light more than likely is painted in gold, so if you have some spare Retributor gold armour left over from your Age of Sigmar, it'd be handy. Now this paint guide is actually quite a good one. It shows you how to paint camouflage patterns with Dawnstone, Mechanica Standard Grey, Administratum Grey. And this is something I actually don't know how to do myself. So it's one issue that is actually very good because my librarian does have the plain grey cloak, and I've never actually touched up on him and finished him because basically I didn't know how to do the camouflage pattern. But it shows you how to do it here, and it is quite a good little guide. It's the same thing here with the Administratum Grey. It shows you how to kind of finish off the sisters. So there's a lot of kind of final galleries coming about here, even in the sense that you can kind of add scratch marks to the Triarch Stalker and kind of damage to the big huge hemotrope reactor. So it's a good paint guide, this one. You also have the Chain of Command, which is the mission at the end, and it gives you kind of a section of army lists. So you have different options here. So this is where the game gets more interesting, in that you kind of have to kind of think for yourself what works best with what and who and what to bring, because you can't bring everything. And it has here, of course, 1 or 2 of the actual army lists. The next issue, of course, is the one that comes with the second of the 3 Tomb Blades. So this one, of course, goes into more sisters lore. So there's Saint Celestine, who's the living saint, to be kind of a hero to the sisters. It goes into the battle zone of Shoza. It also goes into the Death Watch. Now, the Death Watch are a very interesting faction. They're Space Marines that draw specialists from every chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. So you would have things like, say, Ultramarines working with Space Wolves, working with Blood Angels, working with Salamanders, working with Iron Fists. It's just, or sorry, not Iron Fists, Imperial Fists and the Iron Hands. My apologies. But it's basically it's the kind of the special forces and the pick of the litter for the Death Watch. And what's really cool about it is that Marines that do service in it get to wear the shoulder armor, showing that they've spent time in the Death Watch, and they bring their expertise in kind of fighting the worst that the 40k universe has to offer back to their own chapters. You also have some interesting here, which is the non-militant orders. So this goes into the logistics of the sisters, which is actually quite cool, and this is stuff I did not know about. So obviously you have the Orders Hospitalier, so basically the medics. You have the Orders Dialogus, so basically these would be kind of like the code hackers, intelligence, so they're the ones that specialize in kind of dealing with the Xenos. The Order Famulus, which would be kind of like the diplomats, and the Order Pronatus, which are the ones that kind of guard the relics. So there was a nice little bit of lore there in the sisters I did not know about. You also have, of course, how to build the Tomb Blade, how to paint the Tomb Blade. Now this one actually builds a little different to the last one. You actually kind of swap the guide fins. So I'll show you quite quickly here. the guide fins on the previous one were in the back, whereas the guide fins are in the front, which actually caught me by surprise. So if you're making this, make sure you're watching the actual instruction book before you do it. And of course we have Forcing the Breach, which brings in, again, 2 different types of army lists. So these kind of factions are pretty cool because you get your factions. These battles are kind of cool because you get to kind of play them twice with 2 different army lists and see what works for you. So let's have a look at the actual Toonblade itself. Now again, it's largely the same sprue as the previous one, but it just comes with extra pieces that you can kind of make into a different build order. So I had fun with this one. I didn't bother kind of doing the mood green glow on the pieces here because I didn't want to kind of highlight it. I wanted to kind of ask a few friends that they preferred with the kind of the dark green or the glowing white green. But nevertheless, it's a bitty little model. I like it. I had fun building it, but this guy is actually quite hard to put in. You build the base part here, and then you have to kind of slide them in, and you wouldn't want to be too rough about it lest you kind of break the model. Again, the other thing is these fins here are in the front, whereas in the previous edition they were in the back. So obviously it's cool because you kind of get another different little shape to the model, but it's something to be aware of that don't take it for granted when you're building it. And of course it has all the usual kind of beautiful GW detail here that you can kind of touch up and add to it. So I mean, again, it's a quick little model, but a lovely little model and kind of a very fast mobile flyer for the Necrons in the game. Now, issue 58 comes with the second of your 3 Canoptic Wraiths, and of course it's not the same sprue as the last one because it has a different pose. It also focuses on some interesting lore stuff in this issue. So you have the origins of certain heroes of the Space Marines. Now you have Marneus Calgar, who is the chapter master of the Ultramarines. And before Guilliman's return, he was essentially the leader of the Ultramarines. But when Guilliman, who would be the Primarch of the Ultramarines, returned, he should have kind of taken over the Ultramarines, but he had the entire Imperium to run instead. So Marneus Calgar, even though he offered up his position immediately to the Primarch, retained his position and stayed in charge of Macragge, which would be the 500 worlds. So basically he's the head honcho, which is what I took a very long time to say. You have Uriel Ventress, who's the captain, I think, of the 4th Company, and there's a series of books on him, and he's quite a beloved character. A very interesting, if you want to read some Ultramarines lore, he's definitely a good one to watch. But also he's interesting because the 4th Company have a green kind of tint to their shoulder pauldrons as opposed to the traditional yellow. You have, of course, the Black Templars, who are a successor chapter. So basically kind of a chapter based upon a chapter based upon a chapter of the Imperial Fists. But these guys are interesting because they're very similar to the Sisters of Battle in that they literally worship the Emperor of Mankind as a god. So faith is a huge part of their culture and their weapons. You have Mornam Val, who would be a hero of the Sisters, who I think she's a senior high-ranking figure, but she leads from the front. You also have how to build, so you've got the Canoptic Wraith and you've got the paint guide, but again, because we're coming to the end of an awful lot of models, it shows you how to use some of the paints you've already gotten, how to touch it up again with Stormhost Silver, Dawn Stone, and it shows you some final galleries of the actual models that you've made. Now you also have a mission which is Conflict in the Crypts, and again it comes with 2 different types of armies, so you get to play this mission twice or as many times as you like, but certainly it's one with options. Now the actual model itself is, again, this thing is essentially a face hugger if it was about 12 foot tall. Now it comes with options in the build aspect. You can have either kind of small little claws here or 2 little chains, and just to kind of change it up a little bit, I opted to go for the chains, which I think is kind of cool. Now it's a model. It shows how brilliant Games Workshop are at their craft, in the sense that they can make a model that stands and it poses like this, so it stands out in the battlefield really well. It was Again, a little bitty to put together. You have to make sure that when you're putting the legs together, to do it slowly and carefully. You can, of course, move this weapon here so you can point it up or point it down. Up to yourself if you want to kind of point it whatever way you want. But otherwise, it was a cool little model to make. The assembly is a bit bitty, but otherwise it's simple enough. It's a straightforward kind of dry brush on the base type of paint job, a touch of green in all the kind of the orbs, dry brush of lead belcher, and the Runelord brass for the majority of the actual body. So it's the second of the 3 Canoptic Wraiths, and that, my friends, is issue 58. Now, issue 59 and 60 are a 2-part issue, so they've spread the 3 Space Marine bikes over 2 issues. So, a little annoying because, in one sense, you couldn't kind of build. When I got issue 59, I couldn't build and paint them straight away because it was spread out over 2 sprues. But nevertheless, it goes into the Outriders, which are kind of lightning fast bikes, and of course you have a Sergeant and 2 kind of standard battle brothers. It goes into the Assault Intercessor squads. So basically, these are the guys that get up close and personal with their chain swords. So these are the fellas that basically go toe-to-toe with the enemy rather than kind of shooting at them from afar. It also goes into other types of support squads, such as the Reavers, the Incursors, and the Inceptor squads. It talks a little story about the Spearhead, which of course again is the tip of the spear, so the fellas who would be basically the front of the front line. It goes into Warzone Villamus. Warzone Villamus, where the Red Corsairs are an infamous kind of brand of chaos that terrorize it. It goes into a couple of, heroes and anti-heroes. So you've got the anti-hero, which is Huron Blackheart, and you have Ephriel Stern, who will be kind of a sister of battle that kind of roots out demons and Xenos. You also have, of course, the build guide. So you have the build guide in this issue and the paint guide in the next issue. So unfortunately, you won't be able to utilize the build guide in issue 59 because you need parts that will appear in issue 60 in order to do it. You also have the Space Marine rules, Space Marine stratagems, and what's interesting here is it goes into building an army. So what I found interesting about this one now is that when the Prelude to Dune, it shows you what the actual army list is. So you choose 1 or 2 HQs, you choose 1 troop battlefield role, and then you can kind of go into other aspects. So it shows you some example lists. So basically the rules want you to start thinking for yourself. So it tells you that you have to have an army with a total power level of 25 and must include between 1 and 2 HQ units and 1 troop unit for the Necrons. And for the Imperium, an army with a total level of 25, and the army list must include between 1 and 2 HQ units and at least 1 troop unit. So you're going to have to start thinking for yourself as to kind of utilize what you have and putting it together into an effective fighting force. Now, issue 60, of course, is just the final two parts of the final part of the Space Marine bikes. Now this one of course focuses on the Grey Knights. Now the Grey Knights are a very interesting chapter of Space Marines. They're like the Death Watch in that they're elite of the elite, but these guys focus solely on killing demons. Now I believe their first hero was a Captain Garrow, who was a huge figure from the Horus Heresy. Basically, he was the one who warned the Imperium of what was happening. It also goes into the Space Marines armory, so in sense that the armory is where the Tech Marines would be based, and that they would have kind of Tech Marine war gear and server skulls, and the use of servitors, which are basically lobotomized humans that do menial jobs. It has the paint guide, so the previous issue had the build guide. This one has the paint guide, but to its credit, it goes into fair detail, including kind of layer painting. So there is a lot to it, and it also has some information on the Angels of Death, the data sheet for the Outrider squad themselves, and a new mission which is assaulting the Basilica, where, you know, the Canoness is defending the relics, the Necrons are trying to take it, and of course it has, again, it gives you some little clues, but it does want you to kind of start thinking as to what force you want to bring yourself. So this, of course, was, I have, I believe, 9 bikes, so I've kind of not gotten a little bored of it, but I have had kind of enough of building bikes. So in order to make this interesting for myself, I tried to kind of use terrain for the first time. So I used kind of little tufts of grass to stick amongst the stones there. Now, the stones I had to glue on with super glue, actual Loctite super glue, because normal plastic glue won't cut it, and the little tufts of grass you can get in any model shop. This little thing I got off a Rhino. There was a Death Guard Chaos Rhino in the Warhammer Conquest issues, which if you're interested in that video you can probably see it up there in the link. But these were kind of leftover bits. So one thing I would suggest is that if you kind of have a lot of pieces left over in your sprues, don't throw them away. Make a little bits box, because you can kind of just add up the terrain and make the models a little bit more interesting, which is what I tried to do here with these Space Marine bikes. So this again was from the same Rhino. I had just kind of two little tufts of grass and some kind of flat stones. Also, the next time you're on holiday or anything like that, if you're just, if you're bored or waiting for something and it's a nice dry day, see if you can pick up some little flat stones that you can kind of put on the base of your model. Or even if you're at the beach, pick up some dry sand, because a lot of these things can really help in basing for your models. So I mean, these are just 3 Space Marine bikes, and I've done plenty of Space Marine bikes before, but what was fun for me was trying to add onto the base and utilize it and make it as much of a kind of, make it more fun for me, myself personally, to see what else I could actually do with it and kind of try and develop my skills as a hobbyist. So again, this came from the same Rhino. These are some actual stones which were given to me initially by a friend of mine who was mad into the hobby, a good man by the name of Jim. But he picked up a rake of them. He was stuck on duty one day and had nothing to do, so he just picked up a rake of stones, put them into a Lucasade bottle that he had, and gave me a whole bottle of flat stones that I can kind of use to put in my base. And it's the first time I've actually started using them along with the little tufts of grass. So yeah, these are just the 3 Space Marine bikes. They do look cool. They're very fast mobile units, and one thing I will suggest is I made a mistake the last time I painted these Marines, because I forgot that there was a sergeant amongst them. So I actually painted that helmet blue instead of red. But because I got the same ones again, I can actually just pretend I have a squad of 6 Space Marines, bikers, and that there's only one sergeant leading them. The little head thing here was just a touch of blood for the blood god, just to kind of, have a bit of fun whilst I was trying to kind of find different ways to make the bases interesting. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issues 51 to 60. We'll have a look at the entire collection together and see what we think is the best model in the last 10 issues. Now, as you can see, this is everything you get from issues 51 to 60. Now, it might not seem a lot, but you have to remember there was at least 2 issues which were paints, and 2 issues which were, the models were spread out over 2 issues. So the Triarch Stalker took 2 issues to get all the pieces together. The Space Marine bikes took 2 issues to get all the pieces together, and everything else came in 1 issue, and you got 4 paints with it. Now, in terms of my favorite model to paint, I mean, it's a bit unfair really, because the Canoptic Wraith is a really cool little guy. I did enjoy making him. I did enjoy making the bikes. The sisters, as always, were very good, but this is the 3rd time doing it. The terrain again was fun, and the Tomb Blade, of course, shook things up a little bit with the kind of the different ways of assembling it. But there is literally no contest. The coolest model in this entire collection out of 10 issues is definitely the Triarch Spider, because it looks class. I mean, this thing just stands out on the battlefield. I mean, even lore-wise, you can see that how it could kind of stand over terrain or anything like that, it's a gorgeous model and something that really makes the Necrons look cool. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was issues 51 to 60. There's only 20 issues left, so there should be some interesting stuff coming up in the next 10 issues. Of course, it is starting off with the last of the Tomb Blades, which I'm looking forward to working on. But until next time, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed this little video, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.